Recording started. Looks like we've got about 16 people with us tonight, so we may still have some additional people joining. Just a couple reminders, if this is particularly your first time to be with us, make sure that you keep your microphone on mute during the meeting unless you want to speak. Of course, if you have something to say, feel free to do that, but otherwise we get a lot of background noise. And if you don't know how to do that in the screen, if you just scroll along the very bottom of it, you'll see a microphone on the far left-hand side. And like I said, just keep that muted. And if you want to speak, just click on it and jump right in. So how's everybody doing tonight? Good? Glad to have everybody. So what we want to talk about tonight is really digging a little deeper into curriculum as well as the theory and research and things behind it. So, you know, lots of people have done work with curriculums, and it actually goes all the way back in time to ancient Greek and Roman era. In fact, Aristotle and Plato were the first people who began to develop any type of curriculum. And of course, it's evolved and progressed over time. In the early Middle Ages, curriculum was actually handled and run by the Catholic Church. So everything was religious based. And at that time, curriculum was designed to further people's religious beliefs and to help them learn to do reading and writing and basic math. Also at that time, they did not educate females. They only educated affluent white males. So very different than the way it is in our time. Then about in the late 1800s is when you began to see curriculum evolve, particularly in the United States. John Dewey, who is a name if you remember back from your undergraduate days, who really developed the model that we still follow to this day. It's an industrial-based model of schooling, and curriculum was developed that way. Not only was that industrial-based, the way that curriculum was founded, it also affects things like the way we run our school years, etc. So for example, the reason we have summers off in most places still is it was based on an agricultural sort of mindset, because they needed the kids in the summers to work in the fields and do all those kind of things. Having my grandparents owned a farm when they were still with us, I know I would go up during the summer and farm and help them do those kind of things. So, like I said, we haven't had substantial change in models, which is really kind of interesting because the truth of the matter is, as we all know, education is extremely different today than it was back in the late 1800s, or even through probably the 1930s and 1940s. So what's kind of exciting is if you are involved in schooling right now, or curriculum development in particular, there are lots of changes beginning to happen, and completely new models are starting to be formed. And that's a pretty recent piece. So just to kind of start us off, you know, what is curriculum? Well, we've talked before about what it is that we feel like, you know, how do we go about defining curriculum? So tonight we're going to talk about definitions as well as interpretation of curriculum, how it's used in primary and secondary education, how it's used in higher ed, talking about some of the issues that are sort of hot button issues related to curriculum, including gender, race, ethnicity, being more multicultural, that kind of thing, and then hopefully get you to at least somewhat familiar with some of the work of the leading researchers in terms of curriculum. So for me, the easiest definition of curriculum is that it's a plan that we use that helps to direct and guide teacher instruction. So a lot of other people have different definitions. Some of them are pretty complex, but in a nutshell, that's exactly what curriculum is. When we develop curriculum, oftentimes we create a curriculum guide. Now, curriculum guide is a tool or a piece of the curriculum that helps teachers, and its primary role is to help them in pacing their lessons. When we put together a curriculum, that is curriculum development. But let's go even more basic than that. So when we think about or talk about a curriculum model, what do you guys think a curriculum model is? What is a curriculum model? How would you go about defining that? Somebody jump in, because I will call on you. I can see you. Okay, Kayla, what do you think a curriculum model is? For some reason, let me see, maybe it's mine. Kayla, I can't hear you. I don't know if it's just on my end. Oh, there we go. Hey, go ahead.
The learner-centered curriculum model. That's a model like we use this for our study for our project. That's a model.
Yes, that's an example. Exactly. Other ideas? Thank you. Lisa, go ahead. I can tell Lisa's talking, but I can't hear her. Can y'all hear her? Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Zoom tonight, guys. Okay, so we may not be able to do a discussion because I don't know why we're not hearing some of y'all. Okay, so we'll just move right along. Oh, so we'll just typed in, what are we using as a broad example or specific? Okay, and Casey, a curriculum model is a framework. So they're doing the chat, guys. That may be our best bet tonight. Okay. Other ideas? Kayla, I can see you're not muted. Did you want to say something? There's Kayla.
Sorry, this is my first time doing this. Hi, guys.
Hi, no, you're fine.
I was trying to make sure I was okay. I just joined in, so I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
So do you want to respond or do you want to just mute?
I'll mute from now. I'm not sure what I'm responding to right now.
Okay, no, you're fine. I knew you just joined. That's why I asked. So do you know how to mute it? Just go to the scroll along the bottom and you'll see the microphone on the left-hand side.
Okay.
Awesome, thank you. Okay. Yeah, so basically a curriculum model is a framework. A curriculum model determines what type of curriculum we're going to use. So if you work in a school district or parish or a private school or whatever, you probably have a curriculum that you are asked to follow. What a lot of people don't understand is, depending on the model that is chosen when curriculum is developed, that's going to help us to determine how that curriculum is used. The model also tells us what kind of philosophy that the particular entity has. So for example, when I was over curriculum and instruction in the Irving School District in Texas, we used Wiggins and McTighe's Understanding by Design, which you guys are very familiar with, but we also grounded ours in the work of Filmic English. So for us, the model really talked a lot about and helped to describe what our philosophy was in terms of the way we expected students to learn and succeed. A curriculum model also defines for us how we expect teachers to teach. So it's not only pedagogy, it's methodology, and it also may include practices. So for example, again, I'll go back to my experience when I was in charge of curriculum instruction in the Irving School District. We not only gave teachers a framework or an outline or whatever, we also had prescribed methodologies and practices that we expected and required our teachers to do. So one of them for us was thinking maps. We started teaching thinking maps, and if, by the way, if you don't know what thinking maps are, just do a great Google search on that. Best tool ever. We started teaching those actually in pre-kindergarten. And use them all the way through our high school age students. So that was one of those pieces that was included in our curriculum model. So when you are actually looking at your model, as you learn more about curriculum, you probably can maybe see some elements, from Wiggins and McTighe, from Heidi Hayes Jacobs, from Filmic English, some even go back as far as a Madeline Hunter or a John Dewey, depending on how progressive and that kind of thing that your school district or your parish is. When we look at a well-developed, sorry, there's a B-52 going over my house right now. Sorry about that. So when we look at a particular curriculum model, it helps us to look at and think about the focus. Okay, so are we going to be subject focused or content focused, or are we going to be student focused? I will tell you, 90% of the curriculums that I've seen, they may say they're student focused, but they're actually content or subject focused. Very rarely will you see a truly student focused curriculum, which personally I think is kind of sad, but in this age of accountability, I understand it. The other thing that the curriculum model should tell us is what is our approach. So are we going to be more traditional in the way we approach things, or are we going to use more modern methods to look at the types of instruction that we're going to use? So for example, traditional may mean that we are asking teachers to do a lecture, maybe have students do some readings, do some questions, that kind of thing. A more modern approach might be that we're going to use a discovery method. So we're going to lay a problem out to the students. We're not going to give them any information, and their job is to figure out how to solve a particular problem. That is a more modern approach to instruction. Also, are we going to be more, are we going to look at the content in terms of, is it more topic-based or is it content-based? So what I mean by that is, if you have a topical curriculum, it may be something like the curriculum is centered around the topic of change. So the science units that are developed out of that curriculum deals with change, maybe in temperature, change in organisms. Math is going to be about rate and change. English, maybe you're going to read a book about, you know, the revolution, etc. When you are strictly content focused, content stands alone. So you may be talking about change over in science, but in English, we're actually talking about the Elizabethan period. So there is no connectivity, whereas topic-based, there is connectivity or integration across those contents. A curriculum model also tells us the processes that we need to use. So do we incorporate formative assessment or just summative assessment? Or do we do a combination of both? The real concern is when there's no assessment at all talked about in a curriculum. And I've seen those, trust me. There are curriculums out there where they never focus on assessment. And remember, as I've talked about many times in our CIA triad, you must have curriculum, instruction, and assessment aligned. A good curriculum model spells out what that assessment is and how often and frequently it should be done. Also, you should be able to tell from a good curriculum what the structure of it is. A curriculum should be a living, breathing document. Unfortunately, in most places, that's not a true statement. Curriculum should be reviewed, updated, picked apart, mid-course adjustments, however you want to phrase it. That should happen all the time in a good, living, breathing curriculum. I know as a principal, when I first went, I was a principal at four different schools. And they were all at different levels of success. One was low achieving. Another one, they had high achievement, but probably the worst instruction I've ever seen. They had great achievement because they had great kids. It had nothing to do with what was actually happening in the classroom or within the school. And it was really interesting. In the low achieving school, the curriculum was actually pretty good, and the teachers used it frequently. In the high achieving school, one of the things I like to do as a principal when I went to a new school was about the second or third meeting. I would ask them to have a department chair. This happened to be a high school, so I asked them to have a departmental meeting. So it's like, I want to meet with all the math teachers next Wednesday. And here are the things I want you to bring. I want you to bring, we had laptops for all of our teachers. Bring your laptop with all of your login information to get into all of our systems, and I would list what those systems were, as well as a copy of the district's curriculum. And I learned so much in the first 5 minutes of that meeting, because I knew who could not log into any of the systems because they had forgotten their username and passwords, which told me they weren't using all of these great tools we had, like data analysis and all that. I could see which ones didn't bring a curriculum because they, quite frankly, had no idea where they put it. I had some that it was still in, our curriculum came in a plastic sheath sort of thing. You know how they would, wrap something in plastic? Yeah, still in a plastic sheath. And then those that were in a notebook and they were tabbed and highlighted, knew instantly what level my teachers were at simply because of having them bring that. So, very, very important when you are a leader, or if you're the department chair or the team leader or the assistant principal or whatever, if you don't know how much teachers are using and looking at curriculum, then this is a great way to do it. The other thing in my school where they use the curriculum all the time, my teachers were constantly finding errors in the curriculum. And so we would report those to the district. Did you know this is wrong? Or did you know you left this out? etc. So that was wonderful. That was like the perfect scenario. But really important that we look at the curriculum and know it's never going to be perfect because things change all the time. So when you think about a curriculum model, so it's kind of like, here you have the idea of a curriculum model. Then there's two branches that begin to happen within the curriculum model. You can either have a product-based model or a process-based model, okay? Those are the basic two types of curriculum. A product model is just what it says. It's based on results, okay? So, for example, if you are following a product-based model, which quite honestly, that's really truly what most people do nowadays, because again of accountability. So here's our goal, here's our objective. The student must meet these objectives at X amount of mastery, or they must get an A, or they must get a passing grade of 70 or higher to be successful within the model. But the whole idea behind the curriculum model is it's based on product or output, okay? Process is very much like what it says. It's focused on how things happen within the learning. It's much more open-ended. So it thinks about and talks about not only how are students learning, but it also talks about and thinks about what their thinking is and how it's going to impact their future learning. I will tell you, process models are extremely rare. Quite often, the only place you're going to find them maybe is in a private school or a charter school that doesn't have the same accountability as a public system. But process models are really all about teaching kids to think and to process. So, for example, before I left Dallas ISD, we opened a new school. It was one of our, what we call choice schools. So you had to opt to go to the school as opposed to being in your neighborhood kind of thing. And it was a completely problem-based learning school. And they spent a lot of time teaching things like habits of mind, study skills, a lot of AVID, if you're familiar with AVID programs, the AVID principles. But really it was all about teaching kids how to think and process and getting them to research and explore and to question. So the curriculum focused on that. It didn't focus on content at all. And kids would go out and find their own problems. We didn't even prescribe to them, here's your problem. They would go out and say, you know what, I'm really interested in learning more about X, whatever it was. And then we taught them the skills, how to research, how to question, how to think. How do you know if something on the internet is true or if it's false? How do you verify authenticity? How do you know if someone is a well-known researcher versus someone who's just a quack that claims all these things? Taught them all of those pieces, and then the kids created their own learning models. Pretty scary in terms of accountability because we were in a public school system. But really to no one's surprise, the kids did extremely well because it was their own driven learning as opposed to us constantly feeding them information. But like I said, pretty rare because people consider it a risky model to use. So we think even dig it a little deeper. So you've got these two sort of big buckets, I guess, of either a product or a process-driven curriculum. Within those, you're going to have a type of curriculum model. So it may be that it's subject-driven, which we just talked about. It may be an integrated curriculum, which again, that's where it's more topic-based and we integrate different subject areas. And maybe a spiral curriculum. So what a spiral curriculum is, and actually I've seen schools do this very, very successfully. So let's say that you are in an elementary school and you're teaching 5th grade. You teach all of 5th grade the first half of the school year, everything. Then you do a lot of formative and summative assessment and you figure out where the gaps and the holes are for kids based on everything they've learned that first half of the school year. And you reteach those missing or they didn't get deep enough or whatever concepts and the critical elements the second semester. I know as a high school principal, we had a bunch of kids we couldn't seem to get through Algebra 1. So we did a spiraled curriculum where we taught them algebra. The problem was that when the kids kept repeating algebra, and if you're in a high school, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've got these 9th grade repeaters who the two gateway courses to success in high school are English 1 and Algebra 1. and they would not, they couldn't pass it. So what did we do? We put them in Algebra 1 again, like that was going to make all the difference in the world. Stupidest thing ever, right? And, and we'd have kids who were in Algebra 1 for the third and fourth time. They're 18 years old, and they can't get through Algebra 1. So we created a double block in math, or 2 periods of math, where we taught Algebra 1 and Geometry 1, because that was our sophomore level course that they should be progressing to, all in the first semester. Then we dug in and looked at where the kids had gaps. We regrouped them according to their needs and retaught the 2 curriculums at the second semester, and lo and behold, they actually got it. And we were able to get them through the end of course exam and all of those pieces that they needed. So those are 2 examples of how spiraled curriculum can work. Inquiry curriculum. So this is where, it's problem-based, it's inquiry, I think we're all familiar with what inquiry learning is, but it's an entire curriculum based on the idea of questions and the kids figure out the answers. Okay, so it's not the didactic approach that most people use, and that we feel like you've got to learn these foundational things first, and then you have to do step by step by step before you can solve this problem. Well, I think there's some of that needed. I go back to my experiences 10,000 years ago when I taught kindergarten. We used a very inquiry-based model. Yeah, we did some rote stuff. We practiced our counting and our ABCs and, all that good stuff that kids know now when they come to school. But we did a lot of inquiry-based learning, and the kids discovered stuff on their own. You really want learning to stick, have kids figure it out on their own, as opposed to us giving it to them and telling them. And believe it or not, some of the most successful schools in this country on any measure you use, state assessment, national assessment, you name it, are schools that use inquiry models. The last model or focus that you can use, whether product or process-centered curriculum, is experiential. Most often you'll see experiential curriculum in the arts, because the arts lend themselves very easily to that. Sometimes you'll see it in the sciences. But experiential is you give kids an experience and you build your curriculum around the experience. So very basic idea. It's what we should do when we take kids to the zoo in kindergarten or first or second grade. They experience the zoo. Then we come back and we learn about the zoo animals. We count the animals, we add the animals, we subtract the animals, we read stories about the animals. We do science projects around it. That's what experiential learning should be. As opposed to, you guys have been great and good for 5 weeks, so for our field trip, we're going to go to the zoo, and there's no connectivity at all to learning. So the idea is you start with experiences first, and then you move into the learning. Experiential curriculum is particularly effective with low socioeconomic kids. They don't have a lot of experiences that our children have. They've probably never been to a museum, don't know what a museum is, or they maybe haven't visited the Space Center or any of those kinds of things. So if you are working with a low socioeconomic, population of students, or students that are coming from poverty, I would really encourage you to incorporate, even if your curriculum as a whole is very subject-driven and product-driven, you can still pull in experiential elements as a way to teach them very effectively. I know when I was a middle school principal, my school sat literally 5 miles from downtown Dallas. We were in a very, very impoverished area. We had the highest crime rate in the city. I had 36 identified gangs in my building, et cetera. And so we had a lot of challenges, but I was blown away because my teachers, kept telling me, look, these kids don't have enough experiences and stuff. So we worked really hard, raised a lot of money, got some donors and stuff. We took our kids at Christmas to the Galleria. If you're familiar with Dallas, it's just a big mall with an ice skating rink in the middle. My kids who live less than 10 miles from the Galleria Mall, and these are 12, 13, 14-year-old children, had never been 10 miles from their home. So the concept for them of the differences between a city, a state, a country were really hard. Simple things that we all take for granted by the time you would get to middle school, they had never actually experienced. So it completely changed our mindset about how we taught. And we really pushed experiential learning. We did all kinds of things. We were constantly going someplace. Took kids all over the state of Texas. Took them across the state line. That was a huge thing. just to have those experiences. And over time, we really began to see their achievement grow. So just something to think about. Experiential learning is great for any kid, but particularly our low SES kids. So if you finish this course and you can't name some curriculum models, then I've definitely not done my job. So you're going to get a little bit of Tracy's bias, which happens probably in every course, whether you realize it or not, but I'm going to tell you up front, I am biased. So I'm going to talk to you about what I think are the most effective models. If you disagree with me, you're welcome to do that. Do all the research you want, and if you can convince me that there's another one out there that I'm not a big fan of, then I would love to hear from you. But the first one we're going to talk about is called the Tyler model. So the Tyler model focuses on 4 basic questions. And you will see there's a lot of crossover between models and different researchers because, as many researchers do in education, we kind of steal from each other and then we build upon other people's ideas. So what the Tyler model says is, what is our educational purpose? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? Pretty basic question, but that's where you start when you're building curriculum based on the Tyler model. Then the second one is, what educational experiences do we need to do or make happen to attain that purpose? So I'm going to backtrack here for a minute. When I was principal of MacArthur High School in Irving, MacArthur was a huge high school. We had almost 3,000 students, very diverse. We had, every kind of person. I mean, if you could stick a label on a kid, I had a population of those. And one of the things that we set our vision and our mission and all that good stuff, but our vision was to prepare kids to graduate from high school with the ability to live a fulfilled life. That was our vision. Well, that's pretty hard to nail to the wall kind of thing, but basically, in a nutshell, our whole mindset became, we wanted kids, the minute they graduated from high school, to be able to do whatever it was that they chose to do with their lives. We didn't care if you went to the military. We didn't care if you went to college. We didn't care if you went to trade school. We didn't care what you did, but whatever your dream was, you were equipped to realize that dream. So one of the, we had a population of students, and we did a lot of work around the idea of, here's your dream and here's your pathway to achieving it. We had a sizable population of kids who said they wanted to be doctors. Well, I realized pretty quickly we didn't have really anything that was pushing them towards that. We had coursework, all the things you would need to do well in an undergrad degree and make it, get into a medical school and all that. We had a solid curriculum and course offerings, but we really didn't talk to the kids much about the medical field or brought in doctors or anything. So we were able to partner with Southwestern Medical School in Dallas, and we set up a video conferencing center. Now keep in mind, this was almost 20 years ago, so we didn't have great things like Zoom and all this, but at that time, video conferencing, that was the thing we were going to do. And we were able to, I still don't know how we did this, but we were able to talk a group of surgeons into letting us observe virtually through video conferencing while they did surgery. And they really kind of got into this, the surgeons did, they thought it was pretty cool, and they encouraged our students to ask questions. So our kids got to watch live surgeries. From prep all the way through to recovery. They saw the whole process, and they got to listen to the dialogue, and they could beep in, just like a Southwestern Medical School, if you don't know, is not only a hospital, it's a teaching facility. So, they've got residents and interns and all these people, that are observing from the observation deck, or maybe actually in surgery, and then my little high school kids on the video. And they would ask questions, and like I said, it was really, really cool. And I'll never forget, so at the end of the school year, our kids were psyched, man. They're going to be doctors. They're going to be surgeons, they're going to be brain surgeons. I mean, they really felt strongly about this. But I sat down with the surgeons, and I said, look, I just wanted to do a debrief. And that was a practice we always did for any big something we did. We did what we called a plus delta conference. So plus, tell me everything that worked. Tell me the deltas, things that we need to work on or improve. And then we would do a plan of action to improve. And we were talking about the pluses, and they had some great ideas. And then we got to the deltas, and the surgeons had none. I'm like, guys, come on, there's got to be stuff we need to improve. And finally, it was actually the chief surgeon for Southwestern Medical School spoke up, and he said, you know what, Tracy? He said, your high school students were asking better questions than my residents. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he said, I said, why do you think that is? He said, because they're not jaded by their knowledge yet. And it was like this just, oh my gosh, aha moment for me. He said, they aren't afraid to feel stupid because, gosh, I'm in my, I don't know much about medical school. I'm in my second year of residency or my third year of residency here. They weren't jaded. They just asked, he said, they asked the most amazing questions. So the Tyler model says you have to do that for effective instruction. And I'll tell you, it was a life-changing experience for me as a leader, but also for my teachers. So the third question in the Tyler model, how can we organize those educational experiences? So it's not just enough to have them, you've got to organize them and be purposeful. And the teacher that led this program did a masterful job of tying this into her classes and into the work that the kids were actually doing. And then finally, $1 million question for any good model, how will we know if these purposes are being attained? So it's not enough just to do stuff, guys. You got to ask yourself the hard questions to see if it's really working. Okay? Yeah, I actually had somebody send me an email with questions about Filmic English. Filmic English is one of my favorites, maybe because my maiden name's Fenwick, I don't know. I may have a piece of it, but I just think it's a great sort of grounding model to start with when you're thinking about curriculum, because if you can't answer these questions, then you're probably not going to develop a very effective curriculum. Filmic English doesn't have a full-blown curriculum model by today's standards because he was popular back in the 80s. But I still think it's a great way to start a process. And the first question, he only has three, is very simple. What is the intended or written curriculum? So I think you have to ask yourselves, what is it that we want people to do with our curriculum? I'm not sure you've ever probably had that question asked by your principal or your leader, or if you're on a curriculum development team. Secondly, what is the taught curriculum? Because I will tell you, I've seen some great curriculum models. I've seen some wonderful curriculum guides. And then you walk in the classroom, and guess what? It's kind of like, am I in the same district? Because what the teacher was actually doing was light years away from what the curriculum said we should be doing. So a lot of people really push back when I talk about that if you're going to have a good curriculum model, there has to be observation and accountability. But I'm telling you, if you don't focus on what's actually being taught, the best written curriculum in the world will not lead to results. And then finally, again, back to assessment, what is our tested curriculum? Okay? So Filmic English, that's a name to know. The Tyler model, a name to know. Obviously, you guys, I'm not going to talk about really Wiggins and McTighe. I will tell you personally, that's the model I use. I start with Filmic English. I've written many curriculums in my life. Sometimes it's a lot of fun. Sometimes it's sort of like giving birth and having a root canal at the same exact moment. But it can be a challenge. I think Wiggins and McTighe really pull together all of the best models. They've pulled elements of the best models and put it into sort of a nice, neat package. So I always start with us as the team asking ourselves those hard questions from Filmic English, being brutally honest, getting everything out on the table, actually doing some observation in classrooms, not for evaluative purposes. It's not about evaluating teachers. It's about looking to see if people are using and teaching the curriculum the way it's intended. And it could be they're not teaching it because we wrote it badly. It could be they're not teaching it because they don't have the materials and resources. It could be their leaders never exposed them to the curriculum. There's a million different reasons people don't teach the curriculum. Then once we do that, then I move into the idea of backwards design, which is objective and goal-based and very outcome-driven. Then I throw in experiential learning, some places for integration, some places for inquiry. But Wiggins and McTighe, because they start with that, the Stephen Covey thing, begin with the end in mind, and then you develop from there, is a really powerful way to do that. So you guys have with understanding by design. And the other person that I'm a huge fan of, she can be controversial, which I love, is Heidi Hayes Jacobs. Heidi Hayes has some very controversial just ideas. She doesn't believe in graduation. She doesn't believe in grade levels. She doesn't believe in bells or time schedules or whatever. I think she's sort of Marie Montessori reincarnated in just her mindset. But Heidi Hayes Jacobs developed the idea of a curriculum model based on the essential question. So, if you pare it down to a daily classroom instruction, it is, by the end of this lesson today, students should be able to, and it's very specific. That's the essential question. What I see is it misused very frequently. Because essential questions, if you're drilling them down to daily teaching, that's awesome. That's where you get the most bang for your buck. A lot of people only do them at the unit level, and they're pretty broad. So you have to be specific, and you really have to know your curriculum to know what it is that kids should be able to do and accomplish on a daily basis. But I supervised a middle school that just about, oh gosh, how many years ago? About 3 years ago, they got their International Baccalaureate distinction, which is a huge deal if you're familiar with the IB program at all. It's very hard to become an IB certified school. They used Heidi Hayes Jacobs the most masterful way I've ever seen. They had a daily essential question that was just spot on for kids. The kids kept track of their own learning, very objective and goal-based. I could walk into a classroom and say to a student, okay, tell me objective, blah, 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 blah. Where are you on it? Oh, I've mastered that one. How do you know you've mastered it? Well, look, here's my learning profile. Here's how I did on my formative assessment. Here's how I did on my summative assessment. The kids knew this. So when you use Heidi Hayes Jacobs, it's objective and goal-based, outcome-driven, but also very focused on that idea of a broad essential question that you literally narrow down to daily instruction. Great tool for kids and teachers. So speaking of outcomes, you may remember there was a big movement and some hoopla back in, I guess it was probably the 90s, early 2000s, around outcome-based education. It was controversial in some very conservative circles because they felt like, I'm really not sure what their problem was with it, but it is the idea that you focus curriculum on a very specific outcome and not very different than the other curriculums that we've been talking about, except it doesn't have a lot of meat in it. Outcome-based education focuses on the specific outcomes. It's objective-based, but it's product-driven. So it's all about producing a specific thing at the end or an outcome. So that sort of sums up historically where we are. I'm just going to talk for a second, and then I'm going to leave it open for questions. What are some new emerging models? Personally, I think I'm somewhat addicted to change. If you look at my resume, you would think I could never keep a job because I changed jobs every 3 years my whole entire career. For 35 years, I changed. The longest I was in any job was at MacArthur. I was there 6 years. Felt like a lifetime. Because I'm one of those people, I am super pumped when I go in that first year, got the vision, want to get everybody on board, and do team building, do all this stuff. And by the third year, everything's rocking and rolling. And if I stuck around the fourth year, I'm bored out of my mind because it's work. I'm ready to go do something new. So I am a huge fan of these emerging models because it is change. So I did a lot of research because this wasn't really my area of expertise, but like I said, I've done a lot of research in the last couple of weeks about them. And I'm here to tell you, whether you like it or not, agree or disagree, online learning for pre-K through 12 is the fastest growing segment of the educational world of anything right now, followed by homeschooling. So I am a dyed-in-the-wool, believe in public schooling because I believe in education for all children. I believe all children need and deserve opportunity. But I will tell you, I predict, I used to say 30 years, I'm down to 20. And I have a friend who debates with me all the time about this who says it's going to be 10. In 20 years, I believe brick and mortar schools will be non-existent. The traditional school that we think of, that kids all have compulsory attendance to go to, I believe they will cease to exist. Online learning is growing rapidly in the pre-K-12 ranks. It's been in college for a while now, and you know, obviously you guys are used to it, you're a part of it, but a lot of people never thought it would move into the ranks of pre-K-12. I worked with for the last 2 years, I didn't do it this year just because it got to be too difficult for me in terms of time, but I worked with 2 students last year who went to online schools. And I was their face-to-face tutor when they would get stuck. So I tutored in things like Chinese, which I don't know any Chinese. That was fun. You know, but when they would get stuck, you know, we'd meet a couple hours a week and I would help them. One of them, she's a star tennis player. She's, you know, playing at the junior national level. She'll probably be a pro someday. She's that good. But, you know, the way she needed to practice, her life was tennis, and the traditional public school didn't fit. The other young lady, she had been severely abused, a lot of social issues, a lot of bullying. I mean, just she was not in the right place emotionally. So she went to an online environment and she started soaring. She's back in school now, doing great, you know, but it was a model that worked for them. The other one is called WISE, W-I-S-E, seated curriculum models. And that's the idea of, it's sort of like the Socratic method, if you are familiar with that. But it's the idea of you throw out thought-provoking sort of questions, and they call them seated because, you know, you're purposeful in what you do. And then there's discussion around them. The other one is called computer-supported argumentation. So a teacher may do a talk or a discussion or a lecture on something, and then throws out some thought-provoking questions, maybe says some things that are true, some things that are false, and then the kids go out and prove or disprove the teacher. And I will tell you, the few times I've tried something like that, kids love nothing more in the world than to prove you wrong. So it really is a popular method and quite effective. Virtual collaboratives. We used this actually when I was in Irving over secondary education. We couldn't find enough math teachers. And so our math classes were ridiculously large. And we wanted a 1 to 15, 1 to 20 ratio in our algebra classes, for example. And we were sitting at 1 to 35. So we hired teachers from India that literally chimed in over video conferencing and other technology tools, Skype, and they would sit on the computer with a group of students, and they would give small group instruction or individualized instruction. That's called a virtual collaborative. You can also do it. Other models include having students in different places, and they collaborate through the internet. Several different ways to do it, but again, a burgeoning, growing practice. Dialogical reasoning, which is just basically students accessing and using technology tools. And there's some of them that, quite frankly, are so new that I couldn't even explain them if I tried. But it's the idea of virtual reality comes to education. And then the 5E model has actually been around a while, but it's sort of seeing a resurgence. So the 5E model is the idea that students start by exploring, then they have to explain, then they have to elaborate, then they have to extend, and then they have to evaluate. Yeah, Donna, I think you have a good point that we may never get to truly fully online learning because of parents working. Okay, now if y'all steal my idea, I will sue you, so I'm just going to tell you. But I have often thought about starting an online school in a physical location. So renting a place, having teachers there who are content subject experts, so a math person, English, and science. The kids are all working on their own online curriculum. So it's very individually based and all that, but it solves the problem of parents having to work. But we're there, you're there, or we're there as teachers. And if I ever get this off the ground, I'll let you know because I'll hire you. But, you know, teachers are there when kids get stuck, or they need help, or they need support. I still think that can work. Just not sure I'm ready to do that yet at this stage of life. Yeah, and childcare, public school is in many ways childcare, but I think that I really still think that the traditional brick and mortar that you have to go to because you live in this zone, I think it's going to go away. I'm not saying we won't have school facilities, but I will tell you, I can name off the top of my head 10 school districts that have open enrollment within their district. You can even go with if you don't live in their district. So for example, Garland, Texas, they have had open enrollment schools forever. It does not matter where you live in the city, you choose what school you want to go to. Doesn't matter if you're 20 or 30 or 50 miles away, you can choose your school. So they still have the brick and mortar, but because they have choice, they're not getting the same flight out of their public school system that a lot of other people are. Okay, so what questions do you guys have for me about curriculum or life in general? I know I didn't do such a fabulous job. You have no questions. Come on.
I have a question about the reflective paper that we have to write for next week. It says key elements of assessing curriculum effectiveness. Is there something specific that we need to go and look at to find that specific answer?
Now, what I would like for you to do, and thanks, Sally, that's a great question. What I would actually like for you guys to do, it's sort of like, which is better, chocolate ice cream or strawberry ice cream? It all depends on who you ask. The same thing is true about assessing curriculum. It all depends on who you ask. So what I would like for you to do is, between your own readings or the stuff that I post or any research you guys do through a Google search or whatever, pick one that you think is good and tell me why you think it's good. Because there's really no right or wrong answer. Like I said, I've worked with different groups, different people, and I've used a million different models. Quite honestly, I will say that they are all pretty effective. It's just the only caveat to that, I would say, is that whatever you use to assess the curriculum has to fit with that model. Does that make sense? I'm trying to think of a concrete example. So let's say that I'm using Heidi Hayes Jacobs methods, and that's how I've grounded my curriculum. That's my model. I wouldn't want to go out and use an assessment that is completely process oriented, because hers is a product-based curriculum. Okay? So maybe a better way to do this would be to think about a curriculum model, that you like, and then tell me what a good assessment might be, and here's why. Does that help? Okay. Yeah, and open enrollment has created athletic powerhouses. Yeah, there's one here where I live, a very large one. There's a school district where I used to live that I absolutely hate. I'll be nice, I won't say who it is, but it's a running joke with all my friends how much I hate the school district, because they recruited kids from other districts, and suddenly people went from living in a $50,000 house to a $500,000 house. Funny how that happened, because they had a blue chip athlete. But anyway, such as Texas football. Other questions? Comments? You guys feeling okay about everything? I mean, I hope you're not feeling overwhelmed. I hope you're not overthinking all this. Yeah, Lisa, go ahead. Oh, we still can't hear you, Lisa. Try again, Lisa. Yeah,
what
Lisa,
I'm saying?
Yeah, we can. Now we hear you. Go ahead. Oh, we just lost you again. Lisa, try unmuting your mic. Let me see if I can unmute you. Okay, try now.
What I'm saying?
Now we hear you.
Nope.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Never mind.
Okay. Okay, anything else, guys? Other questions?
Hello.
Hey, is that Lisa? Go ahead. Okay, well, I can't seem to hear Lisa. I don't know what's going on exactly. So just, I know we're kind of winding down. We've got, what, 2.5, 3 more weeks left before we end on June the 23rd. I have posted everything through the end of the course. I'm not, just if you see something that looks wonky or weird, just let me know. I try to edit all the time, but, like I said, this has not been my best course, simply because I didn't expect to teach it until after it already started. So if something's not working or whatever, I know we've had some issues with submitting the group assignment. Moodle and I are still arguing about how to get this fixed. Just email me your assignment, and I think there's one that's like posted that everybody can see. Maybe that's my other class, because I've got Moodle issues there too. But if something doesn't work, just email it to me. A deadline is a suggestion at this point. I would prefer you don't all wait until the last day of class to submit everything, because I'll have a hard time getting it all graded and done in time, because I have to post grades. Class ends on Saturday. I have to post grades by 9 a.m. on Monday. But like I said, I understand life happens. Hopefully you guys are all out of school and things aren't as crazy now. But, you know, I love working with you guys, and, you know, feel free to email me. I get about 200 emails a day, so don't get upset if I don't respond immediately. I try to get through all my emails every day, but there's some days, like right now we're doing financial reconciliation before we close out the fiscal year at LSU, so it's a little crazy. I'm spending a lot of time with stuff I don't like as far as accounting goes. Okay. Yeah, one person, yeah, well, thank you for the question. Yes, one person could submit for the group. Just make sure everybody's name's on it so that I know exactly who to do, and I just enter the grades. Okay. All right, guys, well, if there's nothing else, thank you. It was good to see the dedicated group tonight. Y'all have a wonderful week and weekend, and we'll touch base again next week. Thanks, guys.